Hi, everyone. Welcome to Angel Borrelli Pitching and the Fix. I am Angel Borrelli. Thank you for listening to Season 10, Episode 2. Pitchers need to pitch is the topic of today's teaching moment. And as always, we will begin with the inside pitch featuring my co-host and former minor league pitcher, Joe Demers. Hey, Joe, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Angel. How are you?
I'm doing great too, and welcome back. And I know you've got some cool stuff for us because, wow, there's been a lot of stuff happening.
A lot going on. I just wanted to update our listeners on how the new rules are going.
Great.
And talk to them a little bit about this new pitch called the sweeper.
Awesome. Yay. I'm so glad you're going to talk about that. Fantastic. So have at it.
Yeah, so I think overall in general, I think the new rule changes have been a positive so far, and I think fans are really enjoying it. This is like the first season where I've noticed that a lot of people who weren't baseball fans are reaching out to me and watching baseball more closely again, which is really cool to see. Let's see, the average time of the 9-inning games have gone down about 25 minutes. It's
Interesting.
yeah, so it's each game is 2 hours 37 this year compared to 3 hours 9 minutes in 2022, which is a little interesting.
Holy. Wow. Well, that makes it easy for those of us who want to watch more than one game, huh?
Totally. And
Yeah.
the Twins Marlins last week was under 2 hours. They had an hour and 58-minute game.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
Cool.
that's pretty cool. Pretty cool. And then the runs per game is up. The batting average is up. Stolen bases are up. Let me give you some numbers on that. Runs per game, 9.3 this year compared to 8.3 last year. Batting average is up to 248 this year compared to 233 this last year. Stolen bases, 1.3 per game with an 80% success rate because of these bigger bags, maybe, compared to 1 per game last year at a 74% success.
Oh, who would have thought those little pizza boxes would have made such a difference?
I know. A lot more action this year, it seems like, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, and I just noticed there's a lot more running going on. That's all I notice is it looks like you're watching a kids game or something.
Totally. It looks like they're having a lot more fun now. And then a lot of people were worried about the pitch clock violations, ruining the pace of play or the all around vibe of the game. But through 155 games, there's only been 135 violations, which is less than 1 per game. So it hasn't affected the pace of play at all, which I'm glad to see because I was worried about that at first, honestly.
Do you know if on those violations more were on pitchers or hitters?
I do not know. I bet more pitchers though.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, yeah.
But did you see Manny Machado got strike 3 on a violation and got tossed right after?
I did see that. Yeah, because wasn't the strike 3 on a violation? Yeah, the strike 3 on a violation is, like, super bad,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's just like I know one pitcher got a violation before he even pitched. He
right.
didn't even get the first pitch off. He just took the mound, and then that was it. Wow. Yeah, because he was upset. I guess each situation is gonna be different, but it's going to be interesting to see how I think once everyone gets used to it. So, wow, Joe, this is really gonna be an exciting season.
Yeah, so I wonder if they'll be more lenient on the pitch clock violations in the playoffs or like a tight game down the stretch. It'll be interesting to see how strict they are on it.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is I guess so here's what I see happening and I want your opinion on something. So, you know that they're using a time that's the hitters and the pitchers look like they're starting to figure things out and they're using timeouts when they need a break. And of course, there's been some timeout violations. I guess there's some rule you can only have so many per AB or some innings, or I'm not sure what it is, but I do know there's been timeout violations. And I was listening to somebody speaking about all the stuff that's happening, which I think maybe what's happening could be a source for, at least in the World Series, changing it. Because if it looks like that once in a while, as human beings, you're performing and you do need a little extra second, that you got to figure out a way to get it. And what this guy was saying is, if a pitcher's at a 2-0 count and he needs more time, he should just take the violation. No, excuse me, an 0-2 count. Sorry about that. What do you think about that? So so he's sailing along, but he needs a break, and he's feeling like he's rushing. Does that even make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't like that, giving balls to the hitter just because it's immoral. But if I needed it, I mean, that's not the worst idea in the world. Yeah, that's an interesting take. I haven't thought of that.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, so anyway, yeah, I agree with you. There's been a lot of things that have been said about it and everybody's liking it, but I think what I'm amazed at is like where were all these runners before? It feels weird that all of a sudden there'd be all this running and it looks like last year there wasn't, even though the stats are different, but it's not like, but the game does definitely look a little bit different. I have to say that. So
Yeah, to me, Angel, it seems like there's a lot younger players out in the league now, so they're energized, ready to roll.
So, Joe, that was some really cool stuff with all the rules. And now I just can't wait to hear what you have to say about the sweeper. It was so odd when I'm watching one of my baseball shows in the morning and I see them talking about this. And then I said, whoa, I remember seeing that in the World Baseball Classic. I thought it was a slider. And I called you up and you were as surprised as I was. And then you did your research. And so now I can't wait to hear what you have to say about it. But yeah, that's all they're talking about. And actually they're talking about it like it just came on the scene, but from what I'm understanding, it has been thrown before. So anyway, what do you have for us on that new pitch?
Yeah, the sweeper is definitely the new pitch that everyone's raving about. To me, it looks like a long cutter, and you just take a little bit of velo off and make it a little longer, and it can be very effective, especially for guys that already throw really hard. To take some velo off can really mess up the hitter. A good example would be Otani. His fastball is like 95 to 97, and then he throws this sweeper at 85 to 87 with 16 to 18 horizontal break, which is a foot more than the traditional slider.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so
Wow.
that's pretty unique. For a reference, another pitcher that throws a sweeper at 87, it only has 8 inches of horizontal break.
Ah, and who is that? Is that Lopez?
It's Clark Schmidt. I think
Oh,
he's with the Yanks, I believe.
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so Otani has been using this sweeper more than any of his other pitches this year. It's his number one pitch, and he has 89 strikeouts and 205 whiffs on it since the beginning of 2022. Most whiffs on a sweeper by twice as much as the next guy.
Wow. Wow. So last night I was talking to one of my pitchers and I said, "Hey, what do you think of the sweeper?" And he goes, I don't know what you're talking about." And actually, twice yesterday, I had a pitcher say that to me. And I said, "Hey, go look it up. You got to know about it." But anyway, he says, "Huh." So he gets back to me 5 minutes later. He says, "Angel, I've seen it before, but it's being called a slutter." I
Yeah.
laughed and I thought, I laughed and I said, you know what? Now I get it. A slutter. And now I also get why they're probably not calling it that.
Yeah, they had to make a little
I mean,
change.
I know exactly. And I'm like picturing, I always ask a guy, so what pitches do you throw? And I'm in my mind hearing him go, oh, I throw a 4, a 2, a slutter, and a slurve. Like, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, everything is changing these days. That's so funny." But
Yeah.
anyway, so yeah, it is such a cool pitch. Joe, would that be a slider grip? I mean, so you've got a cutter and a slider combined together. Just if you're guessing, would it wouldn't be a traditional slider grip or anything on that?
Yeah, it's not your traditional slider grip. Your traditional slider grip, you're throwing on one of the sides of the horseshoes.
Okay.
This sweeper you hold at the bottom of the horseshoe.
Oh,
Yeah, and you're thinking more than pulling down on it like a traditional slider. You want to pull across it and get that real horizontal break, and that's I think what the focus is when you're practicing.
yeah, interesting. So does this pitch have side spin, Joe?
Yeah, a lot.
A lot, so it has more side spin. Oh,
Hmm.
okay, that's why you got your thumb under you're on the bottom. Okay, that makes total sense. Wow, that's very exciting. Do pitchers, actually would pitchers go and work on that, or is that more like you're a pitcher who I mean, because your hands, the length of your hands has so much to do with, and the fingers, etcetera, and just the way you're built and the way you move your shoulder, etcetera, etcetera. I don't have to tell you this, but sometimes pitches find you, right? Rather than you going out looking for them. Is this that kind of pitch?
Yeah, I think this off season, I was listening to a Pablo Lopez interview, and he said that this off season, he really wanted to work on the sweeper, and he spent most of his time dialing that in. So it's definitely something you have to work on, and I'm sure he threw a lot of bad ones before he found the good one that really works.
Exactly. Yeah, you have to release that pitch exactly correct, which that's I think what you have to do with every pitch. So,
Hmm.
anyway, so that's awesome. Well, Joe, thank you so much for all the information today.
Absolutely, yeah, it's a very interesting pitch, and I bet a lot more guys start throwing it.
Yeah. Well, I'm waiting to see if they're going to start calling it the slutter.
Yeah, I don't know if they're allowed to say that on TV.
I know. I said no wonder why I haven't heard of that, and I don't know
Yeah.
where he found it at, but anyway. So, anyway, well, let's move on to the teaching moment. And as I said in the intro, my title of today's teaching moment is "Pitchers Need to Pitch." So I am very lucky because the topics for these podcasts come to me. They come to me because it seems to cluster itself where I'll get a call and I'll go, that's an interesting question that coach is asking. And then before you know it, I get another call and another call. So in the last 7 weeks, the topic of what I'm going to be talking about today about pitchers needing to pitch, I have actually had the conversation twice yesterday, the beginning of the week, last week, and then at least one call a week, totaling approximately, there were two of the conversations were with pitchers who are actually caught in this problem, and the rest were coaches, which I applause for sort of starting to think that something's wrong with the way they're scheduling bullpens, etc.
Mm, good for them.
Yeah, I know, and so it's funny because just like in the major leagues, you'll hear like all of a sudden everybody's got lat injuries, then everybody's got oblique injuries. It's funny. It's sort of like we're all connected. One thing will come up for one coach, and then before you know it, the other coaches are asking. So first of all, I love when coaches have questions like this, and particularly it's my passion because I do what I do to save. If I can save one arm today, if one coach or one pitcher hears what I say today and sits down and figures out a better way for him to practice his skill than what he's currently doing, or for a coach to set up organizational rotation so that the pitchers get to practice their skill. If one pitcher, one coach hears this today and changes something, I will be so happy because as everyone knows, the reason why I do this is to take care of the pitchers. So, in the last 6 weeks or 8 weeks, these are the scenarios that have come across my desk either by a pitcher complaining, a pitcher worrying, or a coach starting to wonder and questioning. And I've had coaches send me what their schedule is. And when I looked at it, I went, wow. So, in some ways, the information about when pitchers and how much they need to pitch more, not less, that actually frees up some coaches. It's sort of like an extreme where a pitcher, coach, especially with youth, they'll pitch them 2, 3 days in a row. And then you've got the extreme where the coaches aren't pitching the pitchers enough. So here's a few of the scenarios. So the first scenario is where the pitcher is also a position player. So he pitches on a day. Then the coach puts him in the next 2, 3 days as a position player. And then the kid's making another start in 3 days. And when the kid says, "Hey, I'm in recovery, but now I'm recovered. It's time to pitch," he says, "No, it's too close to your next appearance." And of course, the kids don't know what to say because they know, because they've been trained by me for years, that if, let's say, they're starting on Saturday and they're supposed to throw a pen on Thursday, that they should throw a 39 pitch pen. So that's one scenario. The other scenario is the pitchers are telling me, "Yeah, we throw pens on 1 of 2 days a week." And I go, "You mean all the pitchers throw seem to be ready on one of those 2 days?" "No, we just those are the days we get to throw pens." "Well, how do you know the pitch count?" "Well, we only always throw only 20 or 25."
Hmm.
So there again, another problem. And then you've got the position player who never pitches, but then once in a while they put him in, and it turns out it ends up being once every 7 or 10 days. But he never throws bullpens because he's a position player. So now he's in on the field throwing in a game, and he hasn't really even practiced pitching. So I started asking the coaches, "Well, what goes on in your head when you're, trying to organize the pitching?" And they said, "Well, we don't know if we should pitch him if he needs recovery." And I said, "Well, what guidelines do you follow for organizing the recovery days?" Now I know this is some main part of the work I do, so this isn't that difficult. So then they get confused, and then they're like, "Well, if I do this, then can I do that?" And the deal that I think is missing is that everyone's trying to deal with pitchers not in a personalized way. And of course, because I work one on one with pitchers, that is the only way to do it. So I think that one of the things that comes up in the conversation is that when I'm talking to coaches, and even when I watch pitchers do bullpens, it looks like they just think the bullpen is just a bullpen. Like sometimes at the school I'm at, I'll see them go on the mound, throw 20 pitches, walk off. I don't know what they worked on. Even when I saw a pitch not locating, they didn't work on it. They look like they're not in tune with it. And it's sort of like the coaches would say, "Oh yeah, go down and get a pen in because you're starting this weekend." And they just throw out a number.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And so I think that what's missing here, and this is the point of this teaching moment today, is I think that it's a tendency to not look at a pitcher as an athlete that has to develop his skill, but he also has to develop the muscles to produce that skill. And the sport that I want to compare this to, and it's the only sport where we can see the effort on the outside, and that's bodybuilding. In bodybuilding, think about anybody that's put on so much size in the off season, whatever. And let's just take bench pressing. When you bench press and your purpose is to develop the muscles for that bench press, you are doing the bench press, and then you're also training the secondary muscles. You do what you do, then you take the appropriate time off, which would be no more than 2 days. And if you're really sore, you're either a beginner or you went too heavy. And then on the third day, you have to hit that skill again. And the reason for this is I don't care what athlete you are. When you take and you have a skill and you're practicing it, what you're really doing is messaging the inside of the muscle. And in pitching and in hitting and in bench pressing, you're using very specific muscles. You're telling the brain how you're using it, meaning I'm not just playing here. I want to throw hard. I'm not just lifting a 45-pound bar here. I want my muscle to get big. So you construct the practice. A strength coach constructs the rep pattern, etc., to create that response. And in pitching, what that you're asking the muscle to do is to perform, especially in a game. So you're messaging the fibers on the inside. The rule of performance is, and the rule of feeding the muscles for performance is, you put a load on it. So for the bodybuilder, he's loading his bar. For the pitcher, he's pitching in a game with more effort because he's got the chemistry of competition. He's got the numbers he's got to throw, and he's got the precision. So he's using very specific muscles in the forearm, the wrist, the fingers, etc. You're putting a load on all those muscles. So when you are sleeping, the brain is recovering the fibers inside of all your muscles that you use for your skill, and it's recovering them and building them in a way that it knows you're going to use it again. So, for example, if you are somebody who just walks, when you go to sleep, your muscles are being recovered with fibers that allow you to walk. If you walk long distance, you're going to have fibers that are small enough to where they can pack a lot in so you can walk a long distance. If you're a bodybuilder, you're bench pressing, you're throwing hard, your muscles are repairing the fibers, and the nervous system is actually ignited during your skill, and then it repairs those fibers so they can perform again. So in other words, you put the load on, and you're a pitcher is a power athlete, just like somebody who's building muscles, just like an Olympic weightlifter. An Olympic weightlifter does one clean for competition. He does one snatch for a competition. A pitcher throws his fastball, and the nervous system is responding and changing the inside of the muscle, assuming you're going to do that again. Now, if you don't do it again once it's recovered, those fibers start to break down immediately. So extra rest is not okay. And that is one of the other things the coaches would say, well, I was thinking I could give him extra rest. No, you can't give him extra rest, because a pitcher that gets extra rest beyond when he was supposed to hit those muscles again, he is not the same pitcher. He's the pitcher he was before he pitched the last time. His fibers should be getting better and better each time, especially as the season goes on. His load and the fatigue on his body starts to build up. But not if you put the load on, you recover, then the body is adapting. And then the minute your recovery is over, then you have to hit your skill again. Now, there are recovery guidelines, and everyone knows I use the original USA Baseball recovery guidelines. So, for example, and this is for 15 and up, if that pitcher who should have thrown a pen on Thursday and he was making a start on Saturday, he wasn't able to do a pen. They said, no, we want you to rest. Well, his last appearance was the week before on a Saturday. So he now hasn't pitched, and fortunately, he did great. But if you do this throughout the season, his body is going to degrade. You're either growing or you're depleting. It's what we call it in the gym language. You're either anabolic, where you're growing, or you're catabolic. When the body is putting in the type of fiber that pitchers use or an Olympic weightlifter uses, when the brain is putting in those fibers, those are quite big fibers, and they're only useful for those power moves. They are the first fibers that the brain allows to degrade when they're not being used, because they take up a lot of room and they push out the fibers that sit around and allow us to sit around, walk slow. We are walking around all day because we have a certain type of fibers in our body that allows that. When you're an athlete with a forceful skill, the fibers are completely different. So the importance of hitting that like the guy who's bench pressing. If he doesn't train his chest, like 2 days later, train it again, 2 days later, train it again, I can guarantee you he's putting less weight on the bar each time. He's not going to make the same numbers that he had the time when he was consistent. So everyone knows who goes to the gym, consistency is critical. So there is no difference. When I look at a pitcher, I don't see him as a different athlete, but somehow there is this trend, and I don't know if it's because they see pitchers being pulled, or data's around, or if in the back of everyone's head, we do know pitchers get injured a lot. I don't know if there's coaches are mixed up and they're confused. We don't know what to do. But here's the deal. Nobody's confused about a hitter who works on his skill every day.
Mm-hmm.
So I say to the coaches, why does the guy on the other side of the ball get to practice his skill when you, the pitcher, don't get to practice yours? And in a timely manner, and according to science, so baseball has guidelines. You know, the USA baseball guidelines I use, and anybody who's listening who doesn't have them, they're the original ones. I will send them to you. You just have to email me, angel@gymscience.com. Email me. I will send you the guidelines, and it has it for all ages. This isn't I don't follow the guidelines for how many pitches per game. I'm talking about the recovery for the pitch count. So if you follow the guidelines and you pitch a pitcher, you give him the recovery, the day he's recovered, if he's got a 3-day recovery and he pitched on Sunday, his next bullpen's on Thursday. So the first step you do is you start with the game. So anybody who's listening to this and you're like, oh God, how do I get organized? Start with your pitchers who are pitching the day you hear this. And you put down on a calendar, okay, today is Monday, and he pitched 79 pitches, or he pitched 80 pitches or 89 pitches. And then you consult the guidelines. And let's say he threw 85 pitches. That's a 4-day recovery. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, he's pitching again on Saturday. That's his next bullpen. And I know this is making sense to you, Joe, because you were raised on this kind of scheduling.
Yeah, this is very, very important stuff.
Yeah. And, I always use you as an example because pitchers who are real young say, well, what do I do the day after I pitch? And I say most great pitchers take the next day off. They don't pitch, they don't throw the next day, but they absolutely throw the day before.
Absolutely.
And then the days in between there, usually their arms getting in good shape, so they'll play catch to the degree that they need to. But every day you are doing something that is helping your pitching. Now, the main thing you're doing is recovering. Now, if that pitcher misses his bullpen on Saturday, that is not good. He would have to do it the next day. But the question you ask whenever he takes the mound for his bullpen is, when are you starting again? So if he's pitching on that Saturday and his next start is Tuesday, you go, okay, he's got Sunday and Monday. And according to the guidelines, how many pitches, Joe? 59, right?
Yep.
2-day recovery.
2 days.
And you embed those numbers into the pitcher's head, and he starts getting this organized. Now what you're going to have is a pitcher who's improving throughout the season. Oh, and by the way, the one scenario I forgot to mention, and this one makes me crazy. A coach that's actually designing it to where the pitcher only pitches in a game. Again, would you ask your hitters to only hit on game day?
Great example.
Exactly. Never. Do position players practice their skill all the time? Absolutely. You can't have a practice without it.
Yeah.
So how does a pitcher reflect on what he did and what he needs to work on? So I think that in addition to seeing pitchers as athletes who need to put the load on their body with the game, recover from that, during which time they're doing things that can enhance their skill, and they absolutely throw the day after the recovery's over. They throw that day so they can, on their own, be in a bullpen. And now we want to look at the bullpen as the sacred place. And I have done podcasts on the sacred nature of a bullpen to where they can be with themselves as human beings. They are not able to completely practice their velocity in a bullpen because you just don't have the chemistry. So, but you are able to practice the mechanics, you'll be able to practice the skill of location, you're able to just cleanse your head and get into it to further develop your skill. Joe, talk about a little bit about the difference. And you always, because, I mean, I've been with you for so long, so I know what we do in bullpens, and then you had bullpens on your own. Talk a little bit so the people really hear it from a pitcher, because nobody really asks a pitcher this kind of question. Talk about the difference in one, what happens in a bullpen versus a game, and also the importance of having that moment.
Yeah. So obviously, your bullpen is to prepare you for your games, and doing your bullpen on the day you're recovered is probably the most important part of becoming a better pitcher because you're fully recovered. You can give it all you have in your bullpen, and it still won't be, like you said, the chemistry of a game. So you really got to go hard on your bullpens and make sure it's on the day you're recovered because that's when you can really beat your muscles up again so they can heal again, you know? So yeah, I think it's extremely important to work on your bullpens right when you're recovered, and all you're doing is preparing for the game. So you got to go as hard as you would in the game, but like you said, you physically can't because the competition isn't there.
Exactly. So the nervous system and the endocrine system, which is the system that secretes the hormones, you can't fool the endocrine system. You can't pretend to be jacked up in a bullpen the way you are in a game.
Yeah,
So your intent is to maximize your motion because you've got to always practice your skill in the speed with which it's done. This is true for any sport. You can't like go slow
yeah,
and then all of a sudden decide in a game you're going to go fast. But you're fast. Your fifth gear in a bullpen is completely different than your fifth gear in the game. That's why it's so cool because you it's not like you're expending. It's like when a coach says, "Well, I want to save his arm." Don't worry, your body is saving your arm in its own way.
great way to put it.
Yeah. What about thinking thoroughly about what about the importance of having that moment where there's not a hitter there and you are really able to take a look at your last outing and work on things? What about the importance of that kind of privacy between the pitcher and his bullpen so he has that freedom to work?
Yeah, the bullpen is kind of a safe space. You know, there's not anyone in the box trying to hit a homer off you. You get to mess up, you get to work on things. So I would think about my last outing and what felt good and what didn't, and I would work on what didn't feel good in my midweek bullpen, and try and really get that to feel as good as whatever pitches were working for me the last outing.
Yes. Joe, do you think that all pitchers have that sense of what we're talking about here?
No, I've seen a lot of pitchers that don't have a sense of urgency on their pen day.
Mhm.
They kind of just go through the motions, like you said. They throw 20 pitches and not know what they worked on. And as you get older and get further in baseball, that becomes so much more important. And you really can get better throughout the year. People think they get better in the off season and then hope they have a good year. You got to get better in the off season and then try and get a little bit better each day throughout the season. And that's huge for bullpens because you only get one or maybe two a week if you're a reliever. The
Exactly.
hitters get to hit in the cage every day and work on things. Pitchers don't get that luxury, so you got to really make it count.
Do you feel I have such a keen sense that pitchers are not looked at the same on a team as the other players, not with anything intentional. There is no coach, I've said this before, there is no coach that wakes up and says, I want to hurt my pitcher or I want to do something that's not going to help him.
It's the opposite. They're trying not to hurt their pitcher, and then sometimes trying not to hurt their pitcher hurts their pitcher.
Exactly. Very well said. Yes, and I think there is a trend, and I think the fact that I've had coaches call me that are really good coaches. These are mostly varsity coaches and coaches with a lot of experience. And whenever they call, I am so excited to be getting a call from a coach because exponentially if I impart one piece of knowledge and the fact they're asking is fantastic,
Definitely.
and I'm right here to ask, so it works out great. And if I can impart knowledge to one coach, then that coach can save hundreds of arms.
Yep.
So, with all of this being said, I want every coach to make a commitment today to seeing it's going to be a little more work at the beginning. And also the pitchers, my pitchers at first, well, the pitchers I work with, they'll call me after a game. And when they first start with me, I've got one right now. He texts me after a game. I tell him when to throw his pen. And then he said, Oh, I want you with me. So I was there yesterday showing him a calendar saying, okay, now we already know when you're starting. So that's how we determine today's pitch count. And then you're going to let me know. And then I'm going to let you know when your next pen is. And that's how I educate them. And you remember those days, Joe, and you were quite young when we started. So you didn't have to worry about navigating it. But then as you are on your own, you are able to construct that for yourself.
I think that's where coaches slip up a little bit is not planning out like a week or two in advance for their pitchers. They kind of like show up. They kind of know what they're doing the next 2 days, but you got to know your pitcher's next week schedule so you can have your pen set up.
Exactly. Exactly. So coaches, if you spend some time being organized and then you're able to impart the knowledge, and you do have to kind of practice getting into this.
Definitely.
But now here's the other side of something. I'm always in favor of making sure that the coach is never in a bind because of the scheduling. So for example, yesterday was this day where the coach had said to me, I think he's going to be making a start on Tuesday, but maybe it'll be Thursday. And because of when we did the appointment and because it was, he said he's going to start on Thursday. And I said, excuse me. He said he's going to start on Thursday or Saturday. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to prepare him to be ready on Thursday. So we used the appropriate number. So we had an appointment yesterday. So that's a 3-day recovery. You always go to the max number that you're able to go to. You don't just say, oh, he's pitching on Thursday. Well, I want to take care of him and let him do 35 pitches. No, the highest number we ever do in a bullpen is 79. And you throw your warm-up pitches, take a break, go back, do 12, take a break. In the meantime, he's going deep enough to where he can work on things. So let's say you're scheduling this, and this is exactly what I told the coach. I said, okay, now here's how it's going to go. I'm preparing him for Thursday because you think he's starting on Thursday, but you said he might start on Saturday. So we always opt for the closest date. And it just so happens that we had the 3 days. So I said, okay, we're going 79 pitches. If he doesn't make the start on Thursday, I said, will you know? You'll know at the beginning if he's pitching or not, right? He goes, yes. And I said, then you send him down during the game to throw 39 pitches because Thursday is his pitching day. So when we say pitching, we mean a game or a pen. When the recovery is up, it's either a game or a pen. Now, what you're hoping for is you're not so tight with your starters that he's starting every game. You want them to have these pens in between. Am I right about that, Joe? That if you're just pitching in a game, it can be a little more wear and tear than necessary?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, coaches, it, please, I hope you have enough pitching. But if a pitcher is scheduled to pitch, whether it's a game or a pen, and now you're getting an organized schedule, he has to still pitch that day. So send him down in the game during the game and have him get his bullpen in because he will then have had too much rest for Saturday. So, number one enemy, not getting enough recovery between pitching days, game or bullpen. Number one enemy. Number two enemy, not getting pens in between. Number three enemy, too much rest.
Yep.
And number four, not giving pitchers a place to practice their skill, whether they're a PO or not. Now, here's what I said to a pitcher yesterday who's in a dilemma because now 3 weeks in a row, his coach didn't have him do a bullpen. He could have easily done it. And he said, no, I want you to have extra rest. And he didn't know what to say to him. And he's young. He's a freshman in high school, but he plays on varsity. And, and of course, I just do the best to say, well, when you're ready, blah, blah, blah. But here's the deal. I said this to him, and his response, because when I put it this way, I said, in the last 3 weeks, you have practiced your position playing and hitting way more than you practiced your pitching. In the last 3 weeks, you've only practiced it like 3 times. Like he said, 3 or 4 outings. And when you put it in that perspective, that a pitcher is practicing other things, there are many things a pitcher needs to do. You need to develop your wrist and fingers. If it's a day off, take the ball and throw into a glove, get a partner, and work with just your wrist action. Work with your forearm development. Get on a mound and work on your shapes of pitching. Work on your stride. Every day, wake up. And by the way, Joe, you did go and you listened to that Lopez interview, right?
Yeah.
Well, he said something, and I'll call him, how I like to have an eye candy of the week. I'm going to call him ear candy of the week. He said, first of all, I was impressed with him. He was really something. Anybody who has a chance to listen to that interview, he was great. But here's what he said. They were congratulating him on his success. And he was saying how grateful he is. And you could tell this guy comes from great gratitude for his not just being able to play, but the skill he was blessed with.
Yeah.
And he said, I wake up every day and I say, what can I do today that's going to help me with my pitching? Let's see. Is it something I'm going to do in the gym? Is it a certain way that I'm going to eat today? And he went on to mention a few things. He says, every day I ask, what can I do today to be better? And that's what has to happen with pitchers. So avoiding all the pitfalls and making sure that when he does his bullpen, you're giving him the max number of pitches allowed per the recovery guidelines. When you have specific days that you have your pitcher's pen and you have a specific number, you have not individualized anything about your pitching and your pitchers. Starters are different than closers, but unless you know how many they threw the last time they pitched, how can you know how much they should be throwing in their next pen? How can you predict that every pitcher is going to be able to throw a pen on a Wednesday or a Friday, especially when your games are on Tuesdays and Thursdays? That schedule isn't going to work. Oh, and then here's the other sin that I forgot to mention. All pitchers throw 20 pitches the day before they pitch. Now, Joe, remember when we experimented? Sometimes sometimes there is a case where you start and you have to make you follow the recovery, and then boom, whoa, it's my recovery day, but I got to pitch the next day. And so, Joe, we found ourselves in those situations, and according to most guidelines think that you can throw like 25 pitches and not have to have recovery, or 30 pitches, I think, was a number I saw somewhere. This was way back when I was investigating the guidelines. So I said, nope, pitching 2 days in a row is not good. But is there a case where it can be handled? So, Joe, I don't know if you remember this, but I sent you out one day. We were in that bind, and you were going to be making a start, but your recovery was over, and it would have been an extra day of recovery. And I said, go out, and I want you to throw no less than 15. And then using my brain and recovery and putting things together, I said, no more than 22. You came back and you said to me, I threw 19. And 19 was always our number for when you got into that bind where you had to throw. You didn't want to take too much recovery. You just wanted to get yourself crisp. You knew what the intent of that bullpen was.
Yeah.
You didn't make it more or less, but you still did that. You remember that?
I loved when my recovery day landed the day before my outing, because I liked throwing 19 pitches the day before, feel good, and you're not sore the next day. You kind of got a little practice in right before, so everything you did in that pen, you can roll over to the game the next day.
Exactly. But you would not want to do this before every game.
No, only if the recovery day was that day.
Yes. So it was a way to still follow the rule that you must pitch on the day off, and then you control it to where, but to have it be a rule, which if you had that rule like this school does, well, then the pitches before it, the bullpen before, isn't going to be valuable. You do need to go deep as much as you can, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. But anyway, so Joe, you actually established that number, and my pitchers, when they call me and they say, "What do I do?" This doesn't happen often. I say 19 pitches. And
Well, I'm glad I could help.
that number has been in the head. Actually, I tell them 15 to 19, but don't go over 19, because see, I have longitudinal evidence that it works. And guys, everything I'm saying is what we call in science longitudinal evidence. I've worked with pitchers since 95. I know how their bodies work, how they think. I know how bodies work, not their bodies. I know about pitching motion. I know enough things. And I didn't just wake up yesterday and say, oh, let's follow these guidelines. These were a matter of interpreting them a certain way, following them, and seeing what happened. And I've never had a pitcher come to me and say he wasn't prepared for a game, or he was confused, he didn't know when he was throwing. And when I see pitchers say, when do I throw a pen? I go, when did you pitch last? And they can't even remember. Then I know we're in trouble. So coaches, make a commitment to help your pitchers be as good on their side of the ball as the hitters are on the other side of the ball. That's number one. Number two, individualize everything per your rotation. And you can't figure anything out until you know how many pitches that pitcher threw in the game in order to lay out his calendar for his next bullpen. Your very first job would be, when does he recover from his pitch count today so he can get a bullpen in? And on that day, when he says, how many pitches do I throw? You look at your next game. Is he pitching? Is he not pitching? And that's how you construct how many pitches he can throw based on when his next start is. And always let him throw the max for the number of recovery days that he has. So if he has a 1-day recovery, 39 would be max. 2 days, 59. 3-day recovery he's got, 79. And this is for 15 and over. And the guidelines I have do include the younger pitchers, but you would do the exact same thing. So this is in season scheduling. So, Joe, have I missed saying anything about the scheduling issue? Let's see. I talked about, yeah, making sure pitcher practices his skill. I think I covered all the scenarios, correct?
Yeah, I think you got it all, and I'm glad you talked about the day before an outing bullpen and how 19 is the perfect number. But also, I've heard a lot of coaches not want you to throw the day before because they think you need rest.
Well, that's because, well, if so, what you ideally want, what's ideal is just like this kid. He pitched 79 on Sunday. He's going to have 3 days off, and he's going to start on Thursday. So that would be the ideal thing is that you're finishing your recovery. The day before should be the last day of your recovery. So then you are resting that day or playing catch. You're always playing catch. I know you love to play catch the day before. But if your recovery is over and you didn't plan out your schedule correctly, and let's say you're not making that start or your recovery is the day of your pen is the day before an outing, having the 19 pitch rule is a good thing to have in your arsenal as long as you don't. The fact that you have that means you did some misscheduling prior to that if you always want to land like that. So if you get the normal schedule, it won't interfere. But that is a tool to be used. So in my out pitch for today, I want to say something that actually reflects on what I just got done talking about. So I heard something scary on television, and it kind of made me sick when I heard it. And then I kind of moped around for a few hours. And then I realized, wait a minute, this is why I do what I do. And then I actually got reignited from it. But there were two very well known sports guys, ex players, talking, and it was on one of the baseball shows, and they were talking about a pitcher and who's a very good pitcher right now. He has a very unusual style. He's got some things that are a little quirky, but he's doing well. And so the one guy who was an ex pitcher was talking about some things about his motion. And the other guy had his arms crossed and he was looking and he said, So, if I'm a high school scout and I've got a pitcher that pitches like this, I know he's good, but wouldn't I be worried about something? And the other guy answers immediately, "Oh," and this flippantly, "Oh, well, yeah, you would be worrying about longevity, but you know what? The clubs don't care about that anymore. They just think, how can we get this guy and use him now?"
Interesting.
And I was, "Oh, are you kidding me?" And then I couldn't believe it. Yet we know that MLB, we know that baseball is a business, and at lower levels, coaches, it's a business. They got to get the W. You kind of know that the deal is to win, and you get people. You got to get outs. And so, if somebody can get outs, they care more about your getting the out than how you're doing it. We kind of know that. It's just that when you hear it out loud, it's scary. It's a jolt. And if I were a parent or, I would be like, oh my gosh, I'm not a parent, but I have all my pictures and I take care of them the way that anybody takes care of people. And I got into this business to take care of pictures. But to hear it blatantly like that, it was really, in fact, I bet anything he wished he had never said that. I bet he went home that night and said, I wished I hadn't said it. And the other guy was like, he was almost taken by it too. In fact, his exact words, Joe, were what you said. He said, very interesting. And sort of like, and he's the father of a young player. So I'm like, so I said to myself, this is awful. And then a few hours later, I said, wait a minute. This is why I do what I do. Somebody has to do what I do. You see, not every coach listening to this right now is going to say, oh, yeah, I'm going to make sure my pitchers start getting pens in. I'm going to make sure they don't get too much rest. I'm going to let them practice their skill. I'm going to make sure every opportunity they have to practice it, when the recovery's over, they don't miss pens. We're going to start being organized. I don't expect everyone to do that. But what I do like is when you hear it, you put yourself to the task of making a decision about which camp you're in, because you can't unknow and you can't unhear things once you hear it. So for me, I thought about that, and then I said, this is a great moment for me to recommit. What camp am I in? When pitchers come to me, and I have great pitchers that come to me, they come to me not because they're not throwing strikes, not because they're not throwing hard enough. A lot of them come to me and say, my arm hurts every now and then, or I feel like I got it, my mechanics, something's not happening. And that's the pitcher that I will never say, well, are you throwing strikes? Okay, well, you're good. There's always a way to improve a pitcher without changing him, without recreating and reinventing the wheel. So on that
Definitely.
so on that day, I took, after getting over the shock of hearing that and being in that moment where I was like, darn, I wish this wasn't true, to say, hey, well, you know what? This helps me recommit to what camp I'm in. And I think every coach and every pitcher needs to make a decision as to what camp they're in. Are you in the camp of, I don't care how I get it done, I just will get it done? Or am I in the camp of, I want to do it and I can do it because this is a gift I'm developing, and I want to do it for longevity? Make a decision, short game or long game. And I think that in the industry that we're in, because there's so much going on a daily basis, we have to recommit and decide which camp we're in. And from that, let that decision inform all of our other hundreds of decisions we have to make every hour when we've got kids in front of us that we're working with. And that's my out pitch.
Great idea for an out pitch.
So anyway, thank you all for listening. We'll be back in 3 weeks. And please email me if you want the recovery guidelines that I use, angel@gymscience.com, and go to my website at Angel Borrelli Pitching if you want to see any of my products or need any more information about me. So thank you for listening. We'll be back at you soon.